And I've been chillin', watching the ocean with you. Baby, up with a slow motion crew. And we up in our cloudlands when people change, but not us.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Masaki from State 483, and today we're going to have a guide on the underground exploration event. I know it's different names every single time they change it, but this one right here, exploration of the meteor crater, we just call it underground because that's the term that they used to use, so we'll use that. Anyway, so this event is pretty straightforward. The generic basic idea here is basically when the event starts, you kind of work through different maps. They're called like layers or levels. And then you work lower and lower into different levels. The enemies get slightly harder only in that their suppression levels are requirements are a little bit higher, this thing. But otherwise, it doesn't really change too much for the event. Now, one of the key things for the start of this event is once this event starts on your server, which usually happens on I think it's like a Monday or Sunday at reset. So make sure at reset you open this event. The reason for that is because unless you open the event, your research here, which charges automatically points, and your oxygen here won't start charging or recharging until the event starts. So that's pretty key to make sure that you open this event so that those two items are charging right away. Okay, so let's talk about how the event works at a high level. So in general, you're going to be hitting these infected, whether it be the bosses or the infected nodes, to get cell samples. You're going to hit bosses like these for antigen, because when you hit rank, the rankings will reward different antigen. I'll talk about what these are used for later. And then basically anything, bosses or zombies for research points. Research points are this, in which basically increases your kind of like research tech, which will increase your damage or give you other rewards. So the idea here is if you want to rank this event, you do want to have more cell samples than other people. So basically what that means is that you're going to be hitting zombies and you're going to try to maximize your cell samples because you're limited on oxygen. Think of oxygen just like basically stamina. So it works in a very similar way. The amount of cell samples you gain is affected by the amount of damage you actually deal, right? So basically you want to deal more damage to increase the amount of cell samples you collect. Also note on the map, there are a ton of events you can do. As an example, there's like this kind of events, whether it be mining, whether it be like, chance events like this. Go ahead and just do them whenever they show up. They don't cost any oxygen and they can only benefit you. I mean, the worst case scenario is like the gambling ones where you may potentially lose like, certain amount of cell samples, etc. It's actually not too bad. So most of the time, I just kind of go for the biggest reward and bet gains. So like, for example, if they make a bet where you can bet 100 or 1,000 cell sample, I always bet 1,000. So just so you understand how I do it. Okay. There's also something called raid tickets. These are basically used for speeding up attacking infected. So if you find an infected that's like pretty good, for example, a suppression for you, so you can do more damage like this one, you can go ahead and also just hit the raid mode, and then now you can spend tickets to attack the infected a certain amount of times with one click. It essentially just increases the amount of damage you can do and it saves you a lot of time. I would just say don't worry about saving these. You're going to have probably plenty of them. Just go ahead and use them whenever they are available. Okay, so let's move on and talk about how to maximize your actual cell samples. All right, let's do this. Okay. All right, so basically in general, you want to use your best hero combination. So that just means whatever combination is going to be the most damage for your team. In my case, like my Daryl is resonating with Luca, and he does more damage currently than my Grim. So I'm just going to keep it on Luca for this fight. My Cardini is my best rider hero, and my Magnus is better than my Eli. So basically, these are the heroes I use. It really depends on your side. You can't adjust the amount of troops you send, so there's really no formation to use here other than just your troops here. Sometimes I like to set the hunter as the captain. It really doesn't matter in most cases. And then of course you can just march, and then that will work. And depending on your research, you might do less or more damage depending on like what you're going for. As an example, like, understand things like Luca, for example, not Luca, Cardini and Magnus are heroes that don't have weapons. So they, actually Daryl as well, he doesn't use firearms. So all these heroes benefit from this close fight upgrade. So for example, because I'm using this team, close fight is a great upgrade for me. Daryl has a pet, so that would also increase his damage through this pet upgrade as well. So there's a lot of these kind of upgrades that work this way. So start thinking about what your team is tailored for, and then build for those heroes. So in general, though, the regular mobs like these still drop more cell samples than the bosses from my kind of like just kind of discovery. I don't know if this is a bug or it's intended, because maybe the bosses also give you other like benefits, such as like you can, for example, like get on the leaderboard to rank for antigen. So I'm not 100% sure why that is, but it is currently true, yes, that mobs will drop more than the bosses. So if you want to rank higher, again, because it's based on how much cell sample you have or it collects, you don't really want to hit these bosses. You kind of want to stay with the mob. So I'll just kind of show you damage wise what you get. So as an example, against the mob, I'm dealing 121k and I'm getting 534 cell sample. Against the boss, well, this one's a little bit different because I'm dealing way more damage and I've gotten a little bit more cell sample. So I guess in certain cases it still makes sense, but it's kind of variable. I've actually seen it the other way where it deals a lot less damage. So maybe they've kind of changed this a little bit too. Anyway, so yeah, as far as like the exploration goes, so these are the ones that you have this March for 19. If you know the mechanic to deal with a boss, and this actually could yield more for you damage-wise, but in general, just marching is probably going to be the best option here, and it's going to be faster too. You don't have to really worry about the mechanics, and you'll do fine for the event. Okay. In general, though, hit mobs that have more breakthrough, which will kind of buff your lethality, which means like more infected killed, and more infected kills means more samples. So as an example here, this mob here, I'm getting 75% lethality, which means I'm going to kill that many infected. Here, something similar, I just basically have killed more infected here. Yeah, cool. I actually think the reason I'm doing more on this boss is simply because I have the boss killer elite slayer buff. So with this buff, I do more damage against the elites. So maybe that's why it's more effective against this one, even though it has one suppression here. Cool. All right, so how to deal with research. Research is pretty straightforward. Basically, early days in the beginning of the event, you want to focus on your advanced research and you want to focus on supply. These both give you more research points per fight from that point forth. So the idea being that normally you would start the each mob hit would land you about like 20 research points in the beginning. But as you buff this up, you're going to get more and more research points, as you can see here, per fight. So this is one fight, I'm getting about 35. So 35 research points goes in, and I can get my other researches done much faster. And then as you move on throughout the week, you do want to start shifting over to things that might give you more cell samples, or things that might also, buff the amount of damage you do. So as an example, if it looks like you guys are progressing pretty fast, high-speed logistics is not bad because it buffs per floor explored, whereas sampling, for example, just gives you a straight buff. So just for a point of comparison, this is going to get me a 0.1 difference. So essentially, for me to make that 2% difference, I should have at least 20 floors explored, which is not very common. So usually the sampling here is going to be a better buff, especially for the early days, right? Later on, when you have like many floors explored, it might actually be better to do the transportation type of buffs. Again, if you don't have choices, because you only get a choice of 3 out of many different research, then you can actually go for the other ones as well. Cool. So in general, though, golden upgrades are always better, not only because they are just usually better buffs, but they also give you more progress in the tree, the tech tree here. The reason for the tech tree is once you hit a certain level, it obviously gives you the suppression for that specific feature, but it also gives you bonuses that are in addition to like just the upgrades you have. As an example here, my Wise is level 3, which gives me these bonuses that you see on the screen. And they're going to be different depending on which upgrade tree you kind of go down. And in general, for this event, upgrading more evenly is better. But again, just focus on the best upgrade for you at the time, right? So don't get upgrades that are basically useless for your strategy. One thing I can tell you to stay away from is basically all the upgrades that are like, hey, buff normal hero, buff rare heroes. They can pretty much be skipped. There are some cases where these heroes are great for hitting bosses, but from some of my testing, I have realized that in general, they're not really that beneficial, or at least enough for it to have mattered. So, yeah. Okay. Lastly, again, don't save your raid tickets. Use them as you get them because you're going to have enough. Okay. All right. So let's talk about oxygen real quick. So oxygen tanks and the machine, how do you deal with them? So like I said before, oxygen will recharge normally. You definitely don't want it to fill up to 600, which takes almost like half a day. I think a little bit more than half a day to fill to max if you are starting at 0. There is an option to spend 99 cents to buy this thing called the oxygen machine. It will recharge like 40 oxygen every 5 hours, which is not too bad because actually throughout the whole entire event, it's active for the entire event. For that 99 cents, you're going to get a lot more oxygen than if you buy this $4.99 pack, which for some players, this is totally fine because, maybe you're going for high rank and you need that extra oxygen. But for most players, just buying this oxygen machine is going to give you a ton of extra oxygen that's available. The other cool thing about the oxygen machine is this doesn't count towards your limit over here, which means essentially you can save this amount up for when you actually need it. As an example, when a certain boss is like, defeated, or right before defeating, you can then spend your march against your extra oxygen that's stored in the oxygen machine against that boss. Okay. So again, just basically save oxygen until you hit bosses like this one that you can do more damage. And if you can do more damage, then of course spend all the oxygen you have because you're going to be getting a lot more points for your event. So that's the key. So the marches are better than exploration for most players. I think there are some special cases where certain players knows the strategy. I know a couple of the strategy, but even then, I feel like the amount of cell samples I get is lower than if I just do the march. And honestly, the march is so much faster and easier. You don't really need to do the exploration and risk it because explorations will also take like 20, by default 20 oxygen. You can reduce that amount a little bit through research, but it's overall not really worth it. All right, so back to tech, a little bit more of advanced tips. What kind of tech trees should you go down? This is really important because throughout the event, you're going to try to hit something by the end of the event. The first one I highly recommend is Wise. You do want to hit level 5 Wise by the end of the event before you make any purchases in the store. And the reason is because anything you buy in the store will be reduced by 10% if you hit max level on Wise. Okay. The second thing, obviously, just because you're going to be hitting Visionary, from all the advanced research you're going to pick, you're probably going to get this level 3 here, which increases your research points further. So that's the nice thing about Visionary. If you do hit level 5 as well, it does reduce your March oxygen tank usage by 1. It's not that much, but it is just extra because it's going to give you more. The other parts of this upgrade are also really good. For example, like your cell sample after each battle plus 5%, pretty good because it's just going to be a flat increase to your cell sample collections. Valiance, not just pretty standard. You can grab it if you want. Same as Steady. Cautious is actually kind of interesting too because it kind of buffs both ways, the attack and defense of your squad. But in general, I'm mostly not targeting like a certain level of cautious. I just go for if it makes sense for me. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the event. Just last minute reminder for the rewards here, you are going to have both the Doc's Treasure and also the Research Supply. Do not buy anything until the end of the event, or at least until you unlock level 5 Wise. be aware that once the event ends, as in it goes into the phase where you can no longer hit the infected, but you will still have 2 days to make all the purchases you want in the store. So this is where antigen gets used. So as you can see, you have a certain amount of antigen. You can use them to refresh the store, and basically, for example, if you buy out all the plasma cores, you can use the antigen to refresh and have a fresh set of plasma cores available. You can refresh this 6 times total for the event. Lastly, all these things like antigen or cell sample, if you don't use them, they will roll over into the next event. They will not count for the leaderboard, but they are available for the next event. Yeah. So that's pretty much it for Underground. It's a game of strategy, and obviously if you have better heroes, you're going to be doing more damage and thus collecting more cell samples. But even if you don't have the best heroes, knowing the strategy and spending your oxygen wisely, so getting the highest rate of return per oxygen for cell sample, is going to be the way to get to the top for this event. One more thing, because most of these events do run during Migo and ETH, make sure that you are, before you make any exploration for that day, maximize your Migo possibilities here. So for example, you go in here, right? You claim all your possible rewards from Migo, and then you make any upgrades that you can within the research station here, especially ones that have like this tree right here on the top right, where you can increase troop damage in Underground, right? So there's a lot of these upgrades available, or the bottom left here too, because these increase just troop stats in general. So they're going to make you do more damage or take less damage, etc. So these are always helpful to have before you make any explorations for that day. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this event. If you have questions, obviously you know where to find me. Comment section below. I will try to answer them as best as I can, or if there's a lot of people asking for certain topics, I will make a video and show you. But otherwise, this is Masaki from State 43. Stay classy, and hope you do well in this event.
Even if I lost all my money, the zero runs deep, honey. And I don't need to speak, 'cause